This month of May is a time that many countries in the world celebrate mothers and motherhood. So I want to make sure that we give honor and credit to all the mothers that are here in attendance, as well as mothers around the world. Thank you very much. In addition, for us here, the followers of Tenrikyo, we are taught in the truth of origin that Oya-sama has the soul reborn of the first mother of mankind, humankind, Izanami no Mikoto. In this sense, we should all be thinking and appreciating Oya-sama in this month of May, as well as our mothers in this lifetime. But in truth, we should be celebrating and appreciating Oya-sama every day. But that's another talk for a different day. For me personally, I want to celebrate the three mothers in my immediate family who are in the Shinden today. Mrs. Ikuko Yuge, sitting over there. Mrs. Teruyo Nomachi, sitting right here. And the mother of our children, Tracy Yuge, who I think is sitting right over there. Thank you, three, for your motherhood and your help to bring up our three children in a loving environment. Thank you so much. I would like to mention something about my mother, because the sermon is called Mrs. Yuge's Desk. As many of you here know, she has served our Tenrikyo community for over 50 years as a staff member of the mission headquarters. In fact, many of you here might have been to the children's pilgrimage, where she served as one of the leaders along with Reverend Ito for over 30 years. Well, just to let everybody know, as of December 31st of last year, she has officially retired from being a member of the staff at the mission headquarters. So I'd like to recognize my mother for her dedicated and compassionate work throughout the 50 years. Thank you very much. Although I'm not completely finished, last November I started cleaning the files and bookshelf in and around the desk that many people know as Mrs. Yuge's desk. There were many folders and files, like 38 Moya room lists from Children's Pilgrimage over 30 years ago. There were pictures, notebooks, and meeting notes from Boys and Girls Association, as well as the Women's Association. There were many things that were in and around her desk. Basically, she kept a lot of things for a lot of years. Among the many things that were in her desk, there was one thing that caught my eye, though. It was an old VHS of a 1977 movie called Oh God. I don't know why it was there, and I asked my mother, and she has no idea why it was there. But maybe somebody forgot it at Denrocho years ago. A lot of times, lost and found ends up in her desk. In case you don't know what a VHS is, it's, because this generation has no idea, it's this tape right here, very old tape. And it still plays. This movie stars a gray-haired actor named George Burns. This is George Burns here. He lived to 100 years old. He plays the role of God. He was known for having a cigar, always having a cigar in his mouth, and that he lived to 100 years old. It also stars a famous singer named John Denver. And I know a lot of you who do karaoke know him. He plays the part of Jerry, an assistant manager at a local supermarket who God chooses to communicate with. And some of you might know his song, Country Road. Country Road, take me home. That song. That's John Denver. So he's in this movie, and this was the only movie he made. Well, when I saw this VHS, I was excited to share this movie with my children, my family, because we still have a VHS player at home. I'm not sure if anyone else does. And because I remember enjoying this movie when I was younger. And when we watched it together, I suddenly realized how much the scenes in the movie reminded me and made me think of Oya-sama. For example, this assistant manager of a supermarket, Jerry, is a simple man who claims he isn't religious. Yet he is chosen by God to be a messenger of God. Jerry asks the question, "Why me?" And God replies, "Why not you?" Now, I know that we're taught in our teachings that Oya-sama was a shrine of God the Parent and had the mind of God from the time of revelation from October 26, 1838. But put yourself into the situation where your significant other, or your mother, or your father, all of a sudden says they are speaking to God. Well, that's what happened to Oya-sama, as we know. What would you do? What would you think, right? So in the case of this movie, Jerry's wife, whose name is Bobby, played by the actress Terry Garr, some of you might know Terry Garr, she's dumbfounded. She clearly loves Jerry so much, but she is worried that her husband has gone bananas. In the movie, God has a simple message. Quote, "Tell people that I exist and that it can work, but it is up to us whether it does or not." That's the only message that God gives to Jerry. God is frustrated that people have stopped believing in God and that we are ruining the world by fighting with each other and destroying the environment that God created for us. This is a movie from 1977, but it applies today very much so. At one point, when Jerry is convinced that he is hallucinating and that he is seeing and hearing God, he asks God to show him a miracle to prove that God is real. God replies by saying that a miracle should be something that is within the laws of nature. Otherwise, it messes things up. So Jerry asks God to make it rain. And God proceeds to make it rain, all of a sudden, where there isn't a cloud in the sky. Now, this is a comedy, so it actually rained in his car, and that's supposed to be comedy. But after seeing this miracle, he is convinced that it must be God that is talking to him, and he enthusiastically goes to the religious section editor of the LA Times, actually the local newspaper, to insist that he report about God's simple message. Now, what do you think this editor would think? The next day, the newspaper has a short sentence about the sad state of society and how he recently met a local supermarket assistant manager who is imagining that he is talking to God. Most people think that he has gone insane. But the next day, a television news reporter mentions the newspaper article at the end of the broadcast as a little special interest story. This leads to Jerry getting an appearance on a nationally televised talk show, which leads to God's message being given to a larger audience, which then leads to bigger things, which I won't get into now because I don't want to spoil the movie for you. I guess you'll just have to watch the movie yourself, or let me know if you're interested in borrowing the VHS, if you have a machine at home. Well, this scene, if you know the life of Oya-sama, reminds me of one of the many miracles from our stories of Oya-sama. So I'd like to read a section from our sacred text, The Life of Oya-sama, the foundress of Tenrikyo, on page 188. During a severe drought in 1883, villagers from the nearby Mishima village made a request to Oya-sama that a service for rain be performed. In response, Oya-sama said, quote, "Whether it rains is God. whether it does not rain, is God. It is all God's free working. I shall bestow rain if your minds so deserve. Sa, set about, unquote. Then, after discussing the matter with the village representative, Keiji Isonishi, it was decided that the service performers would first assemble on the grounds of the village shrine. Accordingly, the service performers made preparations and left the residence at about 4 o'clock on the afternoon of August 15th and proceeded toward the village shrine. The day had been bright and clear since morning. Not a speck of cloud was in the sky. Shinnosuke and Izo Iburi remained at the residence and prayed fervently at the place for the kandodai. The performers of the service for rain on that day were Chusaku Tsuji, Gisaburo Nakata, Kaji Nakata, Isaburo Okada, Gonjiro Sawada, Tohei Hakata, Kaji Murata, Jukichi Nakayama, Yahei Nishiura, Yoshie Iburi, Tomegiku Tsuji, Otokichi, and others. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip a few paragraphs. At about that time, a dark spot of cloud appeared in the eastern sky. The performers continued on to the northwest corner, and as they began to perform the service, clouds as black as India ink rose above the mountains in the east and quickly covered the entire sky. A piercing downpour accompanied by thunder began developing into a storm. The joy of the service performers and villagers alike was beyond description. Skipping ahead again. The service completed, the performers were resting on the grounds of the village shrine, when the villagers, in their great joy, asked to be allowed to give thanks at the place for the kandodai. So they all returned to the place for the kandodai where Oyasama was, and while they were giving thanks, several police officers came running down from Tambaichi branch police station. They demanded, "What are you doing?" So there are several more details about how much they had to pay, but in the end, the police held everyone in custody for interfering with the water supply by the service for rain. Let me repeat so that sinks in. The police held everyone in custody for interfering with the water supply for the service for rain. It's very hard to believe. They were accused of causing the rain, which should have fallen to all other nearby villagers, to fall on Mishima village only. They were also charged for obstructing traffic by performing the service on the side of the road. After they paid the fines, they were released later that same day, except for Oyasama, who was imprisoned alone that night and released the next day. Sure, she didn't do anything. She wasn't even in the service, but they arrested her, and she was 85 years old at the time. Now, let's all think about that for a moment, because that's just an incredible thing to happen. But the police came and they arrested them. Keep in mind that charging the followers with a crime, it is on official police records that the service for rain had in fact brought about the blessing of rain. Now, just like the movie example that I presented, this miracle further proved to the followers around that time, Oesama's words are God the Parent's words. In fact, many of the followers that participated that day in the service for rain are considered the disciples of Oyasama, and their stories are recorded in various books, mostly in Japanese, but for those of us English readers, I want to show you a book. This is a great book that very few of us really know about, and this is the book right here. It's a small book, but it's a purple book called Disciples of Oyasama, Foundress of Tenrikyo. And I only recently found out about this book. It was translated many years ago. And it was translated, I didn't know. it was translated by my father. And I had no idea that this was around. But it's one of the few books that actually gives credit to the translator. And it gives a profile of the many people that were around Oyasama at the time. So please look for this book on the back shelf. There's, I think, a few copies left. They're about $4 each. But we should be reading all of the other books about Oyasama's life. The Life of Oyasama, of course. The Anecdotes of Oyasama, which is undergoing a thorough retranslation in English, and the Illustrated Tale of Oyasama, which is like the manga book. I mean, we should all have that in our bookshelf and read it from time to time. I try to read it at our monthly services and try to read it daily. My children love especially the manga book. So let's all read those books, be inspired, be reminded of the miracles that Oyasama performed to prove that God is God. Okay, so I'm going to transition now. I'd like to transition to something that I'm participating currently. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of the Nikkei Interfaith Fellowship, but it's a group of religious leaders from the Japanese American community in the LA, Los Angeles area that first got together in 1995 to commemorate the 50th year since World War II ended. Different religious groups were represented, and Reverend Kunishige Ito, the head minister of Westside Church, was asked to represent Tenrikyo at that time. Since that time, the group has had regular meetings at different religious locations where they take tours of the facilities and discuss various topics, usually regarding the host location's history and beliefs. We have even had the opportunity to host here at Tennocho for a few times. And I've been very fortunate to participate with these meetings since 2014 with Reverend Marlin and Reverend Hiroko, who's translating up there, and Reverend Kay, sitting right here. And over the years, the NIF, as it's called, has participated with different commemorative activities, including the Hiroshima Bombing Memorial and the opening of the Japanese American National Museum here in Little Tokyo. However, the activity that this group has participated with consistently is the interfaith prayer at the annual pilgrimage to the Manzanar internment camp, which is about 3.5 hours away from here, near a city on the way to Mammoth Mountain, a city called Lone Pine. It is held every fourth Saturday in April of each year, and I've been able to go to the last 4 pilgrimages, although the pilgrimage in 2020 was canceled due to COVID, and the 2021 pilgrimage was held virtually through the internet. This year was the 55th annual pilgrimage, and I drove with Robert Kanagawa, and we met my son Trevor, who was participating with his college Nikkei Student Union. And I didn't plan on participating with the interfaith prayer because they had already set who was going to do it, and it was in the program, which is always at the end of the day's program. But I happened to have my kyofuku in my car because I had worn it for morning service here at Tennocho before I left to Manzanar. So when people were gathering for the interfaith prayer, I asked Reverend Dixon Yagi, our Nikkei Interfaith Fellowship chief and Christian minister, if I could wear the kyofuku and stand with him in solidarity. There were also 4 Buddhist priests there, but for some reason, neither of them had ever done the prayer at Manzanar, so they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to start the program, and we were all standing around. And so I said, is it okay if I start the program? And they said, yeah, do the prayer. So I went up there in my kyofuku, and I explained what Tenrikyo, how Tenrikyo prays, and that we clap 4 times, and there was about 300 people waiting around for it to start. And it was very nice because from that simple explanation, there was a lot of people clapping 4 times to open a prayer and clapping 4 times to close a prayer and to the memorial clapping, and it was a very beautiful thing to to be a part of. After the program was over, I was surprised to have some people come up to me and tell me how happy they are that Tenrikyo was being represented. There were people connected to Tenrikyo in different ways. One person grew up attending services at Sacramento Church, and another person says that she is related to Reverend Mas Miano from South California Church, and another said that his great-grandfather was the first minister of San Francisco Church, Reverend Tsunetaro Kanzawa, and he had no idea, but he said, yeah, somewhere in San Francisco. And I said, that is the very first church, Tenrikyo Church for us in the United States. So I was very touched that I got to meet him, and we got to share stories about Reverend Grace Jimbo. He remembers his auntie, Grace Jimbo. But suddenly, I understood my larger purpose for being there that day, and that it wasn't an accident that things happened the way that it did. I also had the opportunity to invite them for the 90th anniversary, and hopefully they'll be able to attend. I also made a connection with a professional musician who played there, Mr. Ken Koshio, who performed taiko and guitar at the pilgrimage. Some of you might remember him because when he first came to the United States in 1998, he lived down the street on Michigan Avenue at one of those apartments while he performed guitar and folk music at different venues in LA. I used to see him in Little Tokyo on the sidewalk, just playing his guitar. Anyway, he's become a really big thing in Phoenix. His grandmother's Tenrikyo, and he would come to our services here regularly until he left to perform and teach music and taiko drumming in Phoenix in 2004. After talking to him at the pilgrimage and getting permission from the 90th Anniversary Entertainment Committee, I'm happy to announce that he will be playing some of his music for us at the anniversary banquet. And one more thing before I end. Along with being the 90th anniversary of Dendocho, it also marks the 40th year of the Oesato Seminar, and which is the great youth summer program that was started by the Tenrikyo Overseas Mission Department, or Tenrikyo Overseas Department in 1984. And as I look around, I think that it is not an exaggeration to say that many of us here in the Shinden would not be here today if we didn't have the opportunity to learn about the Tenrikyo teachings and way of life through the Oesato Seminar at the Jiba, the home of the parent. So I want to thank Reverend Masahiko Iburi and the many members of the Overseas Department for starting this transformative program, which as evidence of helping us today. Thank you so much. Although many of us who became involved in Tenrikyo did so for varying reasons, by my unofficial count, there are over 20 of our Oesato Seminar graduates from the US mainland, Hawaii, and Canada who have decided to take on the role as head minister of a church or head of a fellowship over the years. In fact, 2 OS graduates just became head ministers last month, April 18th. Reverend Yosuke Kimura became the new head minister of Chicago Church, and Reverend Glenn Honda Jr. became the new head minister of North Honolulu Church. By the way, Reverend Glenn is an OS classmate of ours from the 1984-85 class, and even though his church is in Honolulu, it is a subordinate church of North America Church here in Los Angeles, which last July became a subordinate church of America Dendocho. So, up until last year, our heritage church was the only church directly affiliated with America Dendocho. But now, I'm happy to have 3 new sibling churches, which I can share a closer connection with, something like what many churches experience with their parent churches. In addition to that great news, our new Reverend Glenn is also the first LGBTQ head minister in Tenrikyo, at least any that I know of, unless somebody else knows of one. And yes, if you're wondering, Reverend Glenn gave me permission to say that last part. So I think we should all be excited about the future of our path here in our diocese. We have a lot of great people that God the Parent has brought together to do the good work that God has asked us to do. With that, I would like to close my talk for today. Let's have a wonderful day, and may God the Parent and Boyasma bless us all. Thank you for your kind attention.